everyone, you have Miss Aselson here today. So your classroom teacher and myself are both out today, so I am making a video of the review that you can watch before you actually do the review. So the first thing is we have to combine our like terms. Well, it's asking us, the first thing we're going to do is write in standard forms. And to write in standard form, we need to combine our like terms. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to look for my highest power, and my highest power is a 3. So I'm going to combine this 4x to the third and this 3x to the third. And when I add that 4 plus 3, I get 7x to the third. Okay, so now I'm going to look for my next highest power. My next highest power would be something that's squared. I have 8x squared here, and then minus 5x squared. So 8x squared minus 5x squared is going to give me a positive 3x squared. So my next highest power would be just an x. So I'm going to look for anything with an x and take the sign before it. So I have a negative 3x right here and a positive 5x right there. So a negative 3 and a positive 5. That's going to give me a positive 2x. And then lastly, you're going to do your constants or your things without your letters. So when I'm looking at this one, I have a positive 8 and a negative 12. A positive 8 minus 12 is going to give me a negative 4. Okay, so now that's in standard form. It went from my highest power to my lowest power, and then I had my constant at the very end. The next question wants to know how many terms. Remember, terms are separated by adding and subtracting. So when I'm looking, I have adding right here, I have adding right here, and I have adding right there. So looking at those ones, if you separate between those, I have a 7x to the third, a 3x to the second, a 2x, and a 4, negative 4. So there are 4 terms in this one. The degree of the polynomial is your highest power. So I'm looking at my highest power. My highest power is a 3, so the degree is going to be a 3. List all the coefficients. Coefficients are the numbers that come in front of the letters. So I'm looking at my first x to the third. The number that comes in front of it is a 7. So my first coefficient is a 7. When I look at my 3x to the second, the 3 is in front of my x to the second, so another coefficient is a 3. When I have a 2x, what's in front of the x is a 2. And then we have a negative 4. Notice that you don't have any letters with that negative 4, so that one is not a coefficient. The next one's asking, what is the leading coefficient, the leader? So I'm going to start at the very beginning, which is right here. So you kind of think of it as a line leader. The leader of that one is a 7. So my leading coefficient is a 7. And the next one's asking, what is the constant? The constant is the one without a letter. So if I look at the very end, I have that negative 4. So negative 4 is going to be my constant. And finally, what is the degree of the second term? Well, remember, terms are separated by pluses and minuses. So 7x to the third would be my first term. My second term is going to be 3x squared. So it wants to know the degree. Remember, the degree is your little tiny number. So my degree on that one's going to be a 2. This next one, we want to add our polynomials. And in order to add our polynomials, our powers have to be the same. So let's look at this first one here. I have 2x squared minus 2x plus 5, and I'm adding 4x squared plus 2x minus 6. So if our powers have to be the same, I'm going to look at my highest power, which is x squared, and I'm going to add it to my x squared over here. So 2x squared plus 4x squared is going to give me 6x squared. So I'm going to have 6x squared for that one. Okay, my next highest power would just be an x, so I'm going to look for anything with an x. This one, notice the negative in front of that too, so negative 2x and a positive 2x. If you have a negative 2 and you add 2, you're going to end up at 0. So there are no x's, so we're not even going to write that one down. You could say 0x, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to leave it out. And finally, we have one last thing in there is our constant. I have a positive 5 and a negative 6. So if I take positive 5 and I add negative 6, I'm going to get a negative 1. And then that is just going to be your final answer for that one. Okay, let's move on to our next one. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to look for our highest power. So I'm looking at this one. My highest power has a squared on it. So I'm going to look at my 3x to the squared, and I'm going to add anything that has an x to the squared with it. So if I look at this one over here, I have a -7. Remember, you have to take that negative with it. So if I have 3 minus 7, that's going to give me a -4. -4, and they're both going to stay x squared. Okay, then I'm going to look for anything with an x on it because that would be my next power. So here I have a -4x, and then I have a +2. So -4 and +2 are going to give me a -2, and they both have an x on them. So I'm going to say negative, and I'm going to just use that as a minus, -2x. And finally, I'm going to look at my constants. So this one, I have whoops, wrong color. I have an 8, and I have a -5. So I'm going to say 8, and I could say plus a -5, or I could say 8 minus 5. 8 minus 5 is 3. So I'm going to say, and it's going to be a +3, so I'm going to say +3. And that one is done. That would be your final answer for that one. Okay, this next one, we're going to be subtracting our polynomials. When we subtract our polynomials, we take our first piece, and that just stays the same. So this first piece, I'm going to have 4g to the third minus 5g. Okay, and this next piece, we're going to distribute this negative to each one of those, whoops, there's only 2 pieces, to each one of those pieces. So I'm going to distribute the negative to the 2g to the third, and I'm going to distribute the negative to the 4g. Okay, really the only thing you're doing is changing the sign. So right now, inside the parentheses, that's a +2, so now it's going to become a -2g to the third. And if you look at the 4g, that's a +4g, so now it's going to be a -4g. Okay, and then we're going to do exactly like what we were doing before. We're just adding our like terms. So when I look at this one, my like terms, I'm going to look at my highest power, which is a 4. Sorry, it's not a 4, it's a 3. My highest power is 4g to the third. And then I'm going to subtract 2g to the third. So 4 minus 2 gives me a 2, and there's still going to remain g to the third. And then I'm going to look at my g's. So this first g, I have a -5g, and then I'm going to subtract 4g. -5 minus 4 is going to give me a -9g. And this is going to be my final answer there. Okay, so let's look at our second one on here, another subtraction. Again, we're going to keep everything in our first set of parentheses exactly the same. So I'm going to keep this 3n squared plus 13n to the third plus 5n. And now I'm going to change that second one by distributing this negative to each piece. So right now, if I look inside the parentheses, that's a +7. If I'm going to distribute that negative, now it's going to be a -7n. If I look in front of that 4, it's a +4, so now it's going to be a -4n to the third. Those powers just stay the same. And now we're going to combine our like terms. So this first one, my highest power is this 3 right here, 13n, and I have a -4n. If I take 13 and I subtract 4, I get 9, and it's still going to be n to the third. Then I'm going to look for my next highest power. My next highest power on this one would be a 2. So here's 3n squared. I don't have any other n squared, so I'm just going to add that. It's a +3n squared, so I'm just going to add +3n squared. Okay, the last thing I'm going to look for are my constants, and I have a +5 and a -7. So +5 minus 7 is going to give me a -2, so -2n. And that's just going to be our final answer. We have each one of the pieces. We have a power of 3, a power of 2, and then just a power of n. So we are done with that one. Okay, now that we're looking at this one, we're going to be multiplying because all those letters are right next to each other and there's no addition or subtraction in between any of the letters or the numbers. We know we're going to multiply. Okay, when we multiply our big numbers or our coefficients together, and then we add our little tiny powers. Well, that -26 is the only coefficient we have, so we're just going to keep that as a -26. Now we're going to combine our powers by multiplying, and when we multiply our powers, we add. So if there's no number on it, I'm just going to put those little ones. So I'm going to look at all my x's. When I look at this first x, I have x to the first and x to the first. That's going to give me x to the second if I were to add them. Y is next in the alphabet, and I have y to the third and y to the first. That's going to give me y to the fourth. And finally, I have z to the eighth and z to the first. That's going to give me z to the ninth. So I have one coefficient, one number in front of all the letters, and only the letters are shown one time. So I know I'm done with that one. So let's look at that same thing for number 4 on here. So again, I only have one coefficient, so I'm going to show that coefficient as a 2. Anytime you have something to the 0 power, it's always, always, always 1. So this x to the 0 is turning into a coefficient 1. And if we took 1 times 2, it would still be 2, so we're not even going to show that. So now I'm just going to go to my powers, and I have y to the first. So I'm going to look at those. When I do the alphabet, x comes first in the alphabet, so I'm going to write that one first. X to the third is the only thing I have, so I'm going to say x to the third. Y is the next thing in the alphabet. There's y to the first. And then finally, there's a z to the third. So really, the only thing you're doing with this one is you're canceling kind of that x to the 0 out and turning that into that 1, which keeps that 2 a 2. And that would be your final one. Okay, we're going to continue with multiplying, and we're going to do the same thing, but notice now we have sets of parentheses, okay? So I have a monomial times a monomial. When I look at this first one, my only coefficient is the 5. So the 5 is just going to stay a 5, okay? Now I have x to the 7th times x to the 6th. When we multiply those, we really add them. So now it's going to be x to the 13th, and then we're just done with that one. Okay, so let's look at number 2. Okay, same thing. I have a 4 and a negative 7. Those are my coefficients, so I'm going to multiply those. 4 times negative 7 is going to give me a negative 28. And then I have a to the first. There's no 1 there, but I'm going to put it on there. And now I have to multiply it by the a on the other side, which is a to the second. So that's going to give me a to the third. Okay, there's no coefficient or no exponent on b. Never mind, there sure is. There's a b to the 6th, so I'm going to erase that. So I have b to the 6th times b to the third. 6 plus 3 is 9, so that's going to give me b to the 9th. I did my a's, I did my b's, and I did my coefficients, so I'm all done with that one. Okay, we're going to do our last couple here. Okay, these ones get to be a little bit trickier. Okay, notice when you look at this one, you have this little tiny 2 that's on the outside here, and this little tiny 3 that's on the outside of the parentheses. Because those are on the outside of the parentheses, that means we have to do it that many times. So this first one, because there's a little 2, I'm going to write what's inside the parentheses 2 times. So I'm going to say negative 3a squared bc to the third. And then I'm going to do that one more time. So negative 3a squared bc to the third. Okay, and then we're going to do that other one, that second set of parentheses, and I'll change colors here so you can see that we're changing. Okay, so I'm going to do this one, and because of that 3, I'm going to write this one 3 times. So the first thing is going to be 2a3b squared c, and then I'm just going to do it 2 more times for a total of 3. So 2a cubed b squared c, and one more time, 2a cubed b squared c. Okay, so now we have all of them. Now, since we have all of them, we're going to take all of our coefficients, which I have a negative 3, a negative 3, a 2, a 2, and a 2. So just use your calculator. Take negative 3 times negative 3 times 2 times 2 times 2, and you should be getting a 72. When I look at that, you're going to get a 72, a positive 72. So my coefficient is going to be a 72. Now we're going to add all the powers. So if I have a squared plus a plus a to the third plus a to the third plus a to the third, I'm getting a to the 13th. Same with b. I have b squared, b squared, b squared. When I add all those together, I get b to the 8th. And say with my c's, when I add all those together, I get c to the 9th. And that is your final answer. Okay, we have one more to do. Okay, so looking at this one, we're going to do the same process. Notice that this first one has this 2prs, but it's raised to the third power. So I have to write 2prs 3 times. So I'm going to start here. Whoops, that's the wrong. 2prs, 2prs, and 2prs. Okay, so that's 3 times there. When I look at that next one, this one, has a little tiny 4 after it. So that 4 means I'm going to raise it to the 4th power. So we're just going to write that 4 different times. So I'm going to see if I can fit it all. Oops, I just did that again. See if I can fit it all in there. So negative 3p squared rs cubed. Negative 3p squared rs cubed. Negative 3p squared rs. Oh, that should be cubed. Sorry, I forgot to cube this one. This one's cubed. And one more time, negative 3p squared rs cubed. Okay, now we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to take all of our coefficients and we're going to multiply them. So I'm going to take 2 times 2 times 2 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. If I were to multiply all those together, I get 648. So my coefficient is going to be 648. And then I'm going to add all my p's up. When I add my p's, I get p to the 11th. And I add all my r's up, I get r to the 7th. And I'm going to add all my s's up, and I get s to the 15th. Okay, so that is your quick little tutorial about your review. Your job right now is to do the review worksheet. Okay, so you listened to the video, you completed the sheet. Now that you have that all done, you can go ahead and do the review worksheet and then turn that in. We will have a quiz on Monday, but if you have questions, your teachers will be back on Monday, and we can answer any questions you might have before the quiz. So go ahead and get started.